Today it's about detaching the automatic gearbox from a Jaguar S-Type, so stick around. Hello everybody, this is already day 25 of my S-Type project, and today it's up to getting the transmission out of the car. I originally had planned to lift the engine and the transmission out to the top as an assembly, but the more often I looked at the engine block, the bigger it got, and the engine bay is smaller and smaller, and in fact there's a cross member at the front that is welded on and can't be removed. So I think the only way is to drop the transmission, and therefore I already did a little preparation. I already worked on the exhaust. I had to put it out of the way again to later place my transmission lift underneath, which hadn't been possible due to lack of space before. I simply had to go for another jack-up point underneath the front subframe, pull the jack stand out, remove the exhaust, put the jack stand back, and job done. Later this day it will be necessary to crank the engine, so as not having to work against the compression. I will start with removing all the spark plugs. The plugs are deep in there, so to get them out I had to use a special spark plug socket size 16mm together with an extension. And since I'm not the strongest guy on earth, breaking them loose also required the largest of my ratchets. As on all V-shaped engines, the cylinder banks are a little bit offset, so to be able to access the spark plugs on driver's side, I first had to use a thinner extension, and later a knuckle had to be added to my ratchet assembly. Since my car has been abandoned more than 7 years now, I expected the engine to be bone dry at the inside and wanted to ensure some lubrication before it's cranked over. This required a spray device long enough to reach through the spark plug holes that should also be capable to distribute lubricant to the cylinder walls, which means to the sides. To achieve this, I simply used the hoses of two WD-40 cans, sticked them together and cut it 2 holes on opposite sides with a Stanley knife. After taping the original distribution hole, I roughly achieved what I was targeting. Not perfect, but usable. I was quite tense if the engine would crank after such a long time, and yes, it did. It isn't mandatory to drain the trans fluid, but I decided to do so at this point to prevent a big mess afterwards and also to reduce the weight a little bit. Now it's time to get this thing out, and I will of course follow Jaguar's official instructions that tell me to first place the selector lever in the N position. Unfortunately, the gear selector is stuck in park as long as the car isn't started and the brake pedal pressed down, so I had to remove the wooden cover and search an emergency lever hidden underneath there. This cover is fixed with 4 really tight brackets, and the lever that has to be pushed back while moving the gear selector out of park is positioned deep down in the middle. It can be spotted at a certain angle only from driver's side and has to be attempted with a long screwdriver from passenger side. Later I recognized that getting the transmission out of park wasn't necessary at all in my case, since this shall only help with detaching the drive shaft, which I already managed to do last time. Second, disconnect the battery ground cable. Third, remove the exhaust system. Fourth, detach the drive shaft from the transmission flange. Fifth, using a suitable securing strap, reposition and support the drive shaft to the vehicle body. Sixth, detach the transmission fluid cooler tubes from the oil pan. There are tubes, but these aren't connected to the oil pan, so I shifted this step. 7. Detach the trans fluid cooler tubes. Positioned directly beside a heat shield, this 10mm hex bolt can only be accessed with a standard wrench, and seconds later the bolt was stripped. Game over. Come on. I must try to get this out after the transmission is lowered down. 8. Remove the torque converter rubber inspection cover. 9. Install the special tool. The special tool referred to is a support to be placed underneath a shop lift. In my case, it's simply a transmission check. 10. Install the rubber blocks supplied with the special tool blah 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 between the front subframe and the oil pan. After having been disconnected from the transmission, the engine obviously tends to tilt forwards at the top and backwards at its low end, which movement shall be prevented by these blocks. 11. Lower the rear of the transmission. 12. Install the tie-down strap. 13. Detach the selector lever cable. 14. Reposition the selector lever cable. This sounded somehow complicated. I simply detached the holding bracket by unscrewing two 8mm hex bolts and then took down the actual selector lever that is held on by a larger nut. I think it was 13mm hex. Disconnect the automatic transmission electrical connector. The connector referred to in the manual would be positioned at the right top of the transmission. Since far easier to access, I instead detached the two plugs at the very rear, one to pull apart, the second to rotate out of the transmission housing. 16. Remove the rubber access cover. 17. Remove the torque converter retaining bolts. By unscrewing the torque converter from the flex plate, the engine output shaft gets disconnected from the transmission input shaft. After removing each of the bolts, the engine must be cranked, as demonstrated earlier in this video, until the next bolt shows off in the window. I had my camera positioned right underneath the engine bay and just had to keep an eye on the display, which saved a little time. Remove the automatic transmission retaining bolts. Unscrewing these bolts, or better, the upper 6 of them, required a really big extension in combination with a knuckle that again had to be stiffened with duct tape for stability, since it's impossible to direct the end of this assembly with the fingers. Now I had to attempt the lowest of the upper 8 bolts that can't be accessed from underneath the car, but somehow I managed to get it loose from the side. By the way, one of the upper bolts on passenger side, or at least its head, was missing, and that's why I only had unscrewed 6 bolts so far. Its counterpart on passenger side was loose already and could be unscrewed by hand. By the way, the workshop changing the torque converter on my car around 10 years ago was, or better should have been, specialized on transmission repairs. Here I'm breaking free some of the remaining lower bolts, 8 altogether, on passenger side, and also try to do so on driver's side, until I noticed that one of them is hidden behind the oil cooler lines I wasn't able to detach from the transmission earlier this day. However, after opening a plastic bracket, the cooler lines were attached with to the engine block further at the front. I managed to stick a ratchet assembly in between there and got the bolt unscrewed. 19. Remove the automatic transmission from the vehicle. After having removed altogether 15 bolts, I tried now an hour to pull the engine transmission assembly apart, but it wasn't possible. There still seems to be a connection at the right top. That's exactly where the one bolt was missing, or at least I was sure there was a bolt missing. I have to check this out next time, since time is running out today. For all that, if you enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up or even subscribe to my channel. See you back next time. Goodbye.